The stars over the Zalorian cluster were dying. Planets that once gleamed with life now lay dark, silent, and empty. The proud Zalorian Union, rulers of 8 systems, had been under relentless attack by the Ravkor swarm for months. Entire cities had vanished in seconds. Entire fleets had been shredded by the insect-like horrors of the swarm. High Commander Talaron stood on the bridge of the Zalorian flagship Veralis, his eyes fixed on the vast starfield before him. The sensors were filled with red blips, the relentless swarm closing in from all sides. He clenched his fists. No fleet in the known galaxy could stand against them. They had already tried to call for help from the Galactic Council, only to hear empty excuses. Desperation, Talaron thought, was a powerful teacher. In the final hour, he gave an order no Zalorian had dared issue in 1,000 years. The activation of Protocol Omega, a forbidden signal buried deep in the Union archives. The protocol was designed to reach any beings in the galaxy capable of responding, even those in the uncharted Deathworlds, regions so dangerous that even the Council avoided them. Technicians worked quickly, routing the transmission through broken satellites, decayed relays, and deep space beacons. Finally, the SOS signal was released into the void, carrying a simple message. To any who can hear us, we beg for help. The Ravkor swarm will destroy all. We surrender everything, our technology, our worlds, anything. Please save us. The message disappeared into the endless black far beyond mapped space, into regions so deadly that the Zalorians had always believed nothing could survive there. Weeks passed. The swarm continued its relentless advance. Talaron prepared his fleet for the end, expecting annihilation. The Veralis was the last line of defense. His people, civilians, and remaining soldiers huddled in the shadows of their fading hope. Then sensors screamed. It was impossible. Thousands of signals lit up the screens. Not Ravkor ships, not Council reinforcements. Something else, something massive, was warping into the Zalorian system. The crew froze in disbelief. The ships that appeared on the scanners were unlike anything ever catalogued in Zalorian history. The largest of the ships, almost the size of a small moon, slowly materialized from the folds of space. Its hull was dark, shining metal that reflected nothing yet seemed alive with quiet energy. Hundreds of smaller vessels surrounded it, each moving with unnerving precision. And then the voice came over comms. Calm, authoritative, and cold. This is Admiral Mara Vale, commander of the United Human Expeditionary Fleet. You called for help. We heard. The Zalorian crew stared. Humans. They had heard the old legends, that the species that called themselves humans came from a harsh planet called Earth, a place where everything tried to kill them. They were supposedly impossible to predict, unstoppable once provoked, and utterly alien in thought and war. But seeing them, seeing their ships, it was beyond imagination. Admiral Vale's fleet did not circle or negotiate. They scanned the swarm, calculated trajectories, and then unleashed hell. Beams of pure energy lanced across space, tearing apart the first wave of Ravkor ships before the enemy even realized what had happened. The skies of the system lit up in violent streaks of white and orange as the swarm began to crumble under fire. Talaron could hardly believe his eyes. This was no ordinary fleet. The humans moved with coordination that no Council fleet could match. Each strike, each maneuver was perfectly calculated. Within hours, half the swarm's armada had been reduced to drifting wreckage. The Veralis trembled as massive Ravkor warships tried to retaliate, only to be met with precision strikes that seemed impossible. High Commander Talaron realized that the legends were true. Humans were not just survivors. They were born for survival, and war was their natural language. And then came the silence. The Ravkor scattered, retreating beyond sensor range. Their signals disappeared into the void like smoke in a vacuum. The human fleet, massive and imposing, hung in the system like a shadow, their engines humming quietly. Admiral Vale sent another transmission. This time it was not an offer of mercy. You attacked one world. You broke one peace. Now the Deathworlders will teach you fear. Talaron felt a chill. Fear, yes. He had never seen it before in the galaxy, not like this. The humans did not seem angry. They did not seem heroic. They were simply efficient predators of war, acting on instinct and skill honed over millennia of surviving on a world that would have killed anything weaker than them. Even after the battle, the humans made no move to occupy Zalorian space. They merely hovered, ready to strike again if needed. Talaran finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. His people were alive. For the first time in months, he saw hope flicker in the eyes of his crew. Yet the message was clear. Humans did not intervene for honor. They did not intervene for friendship. They responded to SOS calls, and they responded with overwhelming force. Over the next few hours, the human fleet began small acts of repair. Dropships descended onto devastated cities, dropping supplies, engineers, and medical aid. Civilians watched in awe as humans, warriors who had just destroyed hundreds of enemy ships, gently carried the injured, rebuilt infrastructure, and restored order in places where the Zolorians themselves had lost control. Commander Talaran finally met Admiral Vale aboard the Retribution, the largest human ship. The command deck was massive, polished steel, and quiet hums of machinery filling the air. Vale herself was calm, her presence both commanding and serene. "You saved us," Talaran said, bowing slightly. "We owe you everything." Vale shook her head. "No debt, you called for help. You survived. That is enough. But understand this. Do not send that signal unless you are prepared for the answer it will bring." The Ravkor would return. Talaran knew this. Their species was relentless, and the losses they had suffered would only make them more dangerous. But for the first time he felt a strange confidence, the kind he had never felt before. Humans born of a harsh world called Deathworld 001 had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. As the sun set on the shattered planets of the Zolorian cluster, the massive human ships glimmered against the stars. What began as a simple SOS had grown into a legend, whispered among the survivors. "If you ever send a call into the void, pray it is not the Deathworlders who answer first." And in the quiet hum of the vast ships, Admiral Vale's voice echoed through the void, a silent warning to all. The galaxy underestimated humanity for too long. That ends today. The Viralis trembled, not from enemy fire, but from the knowledge that something far larger, far stronger, and far deadlier had arrived. Humanity had answered the call, and the galaxy would remember. The Zolorian Union had survived the first attack, but the swarm was far from finished. Intelligence reports confirmed that the Ravkor were regrouping, gathering their full strength beyond the edge of sensor range. Talaran's fleet was battered but still intact, and the humans, the Deathworlders, had made it clear. This war was far from over. Admiral Mara Vale stood on the command deck of the UNS Retribution, overlooking the assembled fleet. Thousands of ships, black as night and shining with energy conduits, formed a vast armada. They did not hesitate. They did not discuss politics or diplomacy. Their purpose was singular, to eradicate the threat completely. Talaran watched in awe as the humans moved. Each ship adjusted its position, aligning perfectly in formation. Drones deployed to scout ahead, their sensors scanning entire star systems for the slightest trace of Ravkor activity. The precision was terrifying. The humans spoke little, yet every action spoke volumes. "The swarm believes they can hide," Vale said, her voice calm but hard. "They do not know what answers their prey receives when they summon it." The fleet entered Ravkor space, a region of dark, broken planets and asteroid fields. The human ships passed through without hesitation, calculating trajectories through fields of debris that would have destroyed any ordinary vessel. And then, from the darkness, the swarm appeared. Tens of thousands of ships erupted from hiding, a tidal wave of claws, spikes, and pulsating energy. They screamed through space, confident in their numbers, sure that no force could stop them. But the humans did not falter. Vale gave a single command. The fleet spread like a living organism, each ship calculating velocity, trajectory, and energy output with unerring precision. Beams of blue-white energy tore through the swarm's lines. Kinetic missiles struck with surgical accuracy, leaving only wreckage in their wake. Talaran had never seen destruction carried out with such efficiency. The Ravkor fought, but the humans adapted instantly, countering every tactic. What should have been chaos became a symphony of order. The swarm, confident in their raw power, began to falter. Amid the battle, human dropships deployed to Ravkor hive worlds. These soldiers, clad in reinforced exosuits, advanced across burning landscapes, acid rains falling around them. Creatures of every nightmare hissing and attacking. Yet the humans moved forward, unyielding, using every tool their world had forged them for. They were not just soldiers, they were survivors honed by a planet that had demanded perfection for millennia. Talaran followed them via sensor feeds, seeing impossible feats. Squads of human soldiers felling enormous RAV-core beasts, engineers disabling hive machinery in seconds, medics rescuing captured Zilorians as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. Hours passed. The human fleet had reduced the RAV-core armada by more than 70%. Hive after hive fell. Entire planetary defenses collapsed before their methodical assault. And through it all, Admiral Vale remained calm, issuing commands with the quiet authority of someone who had faced impossible odds before and won. Finally, the last swarm stronghold loomed. Zirath Prime, the homeworld of the RAV-core, a planet-sized hive, pulsating with dark energy and surrounded by thousands of ships in a defensive formation. The swarm's leaders believed they were safe, that no species could reach them here. Then the human fleet arrived. Vale's strategy was simple and devastating. The largest ships focused on breaking orbital defenses while specialized assault teams landed directly on the hive surface. Energy lances cut through walls. Power armor soldiers advanced through corridors filled with crawling, snapping creatures, while drone swarms disabled defensive systems. Talaran could only watch in disbelief. The humans moved as if the world itself were their weapon. They were calculated, fearless, unstoppable. The hive shook, rumbled, and finally fell into silence. The last swarm leaders attempted to escape, only to be intercepted by dropships. Within hours, the homeworld of the RAV-core had fallen completely. Vale transmitted a message across the galaxy. This is what it means when Deathworlders answer a call. No words could describe the awe and fear that rippled across the Council's communications. Even the most powerful empires realized something had changed. Humanity was no longer a distant, primitive species. They were judgment incarnate, a force born of a harsh, deadly world that had forged them stronger, smarter, and faster than any foe. With the battle won, the human fleet did not linger to claim worlds or demand allegiance. They began relief operations, dropping supplies to the Zilorian Union and assisting in rebuilding infrastructure. Hospitals were restored, water systems repaired, and cities cleared of debris. Soldiers who had destroyed planets with energy lances were now seen carrying children to safety. Talaran finally met Admiral Vale again aboard the Retribution. "You saved not just my people," he said, bowing. "You saved our entire civilization. How can we ever repay you?" Vale's eyes were steady. "Do not repay. Learn. Survive. And remember what happens when you call for help from the void." Her voice carried a warning that went beyond words. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. They had answered the call of the Zilorians not for reward or honor, but because that was what they did: respond, survive, and, if necessary, destroy those who threatened life itself. Talaran realized the truth. The humans were the galaxy's ultimate predators, yes, but they were also its guardians in the shadows. A species forged in the crucible of a planet that killed the weak, shaped by necessity and unyielding pressure. Deathworlders, as they were now whispered across star systems, answered only when the universe demanded it. And when they did, no force could stand in their way. Weeks later, the Zilorian Union began to rebuild, stronger and more united than ever. The swarm threat had been eliminated, and word spread of the humans who had arrived like stormbringers and then vanished like shadows. The Galactic Council convened, debating the presence of a species whose power had changed everything. The SOS that had once been a desperate plea was now a legend, told across the galaxy. If you ever send a call into the void, pray it is not the Deathworlders who hear you first. Talaran often thought about that first moment, the tremble of the Viralis, the overwhelming fear and awe, and the calm, unshakable presence of Admiral Vale. Humanity had answered a simple SOS, but in doing so, they had remade the galaxy's balance of power forever. From the shadows of their unknown worlds, humans returned home, their fleet disappearing into the void as silently as it had arrived. The stars themselves seemed to acknowledge their presence, a reminder that the galaxy had survived a threat too terrible to be imagined, and that sometimes salvation comes from the most unlikely of places. In the Zilorian cluster, life returned to the planets. Children laughed again, ships sailed once more, and leaders who had feared annihilation now plotted a future full of hope. But the memory remained. The day when the Deathworlders answered an alien SOS and changed the course of history. And in the silence of deep space, somewhere far beyond mapped territory, Admiral Vale watched the stars and prepared, for she knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was full of threats, and the humans, the Deathworlders, would always answer when the call came. Because in a universe where civilizations fell like grains of sand, humanity had become the force that would never yield.